You know, I can't remember what I told where. If I told this, somebody let me know. And you may have heard it on a tape, but if I hadn't told it in this first or second year, well then let me know. But anyway, there was a lady who worked for me, and the very first person I ever hired to run my ministry, she had run 3 corporations, but her husband had died, and she had 2 children by this previous marriage. And anyway, she was just devastated after her husband died, and she had all of the weight of this responsibility on her. And she walked into a Daylight Donuts shop, and a man walked up to her that she had never seen before. And he says, "I'm God, and if you'll worship me, I'll solve all your problems." And she wasn't born again. She didn't know any better. So anyway, she started a relationship, and they wound up getting married. And he was in the occult. He would levitate tables. He had spirits that he'd call, and they'd come into the house and attack her. He broke her neck one time. He took a butcher knife to her, and he threatened to kill her 2 children by a previous marriage. And they had to stay in the basement, and if they ever came up out of the basement, he'd kill them. And the night that I met her, I didn't know any of this stuff, but the night that I met her, we lived in the same apartment complex. And the lady that ran the apartment complex had just led her to the Lord the week before. And so that's how she knew her. And her 2 kids tried to sneak up and get some food out of the fridge. And when they did, this guy threatened to kill them. And she called the police. And the police had her out on the lawn, separated from her husband with the 2 kids. And so the lady who led her to the Lord called me, and I went out there late at night, like midnight or something, and she said, "Tell this woman she doesn't have to live with this kind of abuse." And so I told her, I said, "You don't have to live with this kind of abuse." Just about like that. And this woman says, "But," and I said, "But it's just the devil in him that makes him the way he is." And I said, you are now born again, and you can overcome all of that. Now let me put a disclaimer on this. I was on Sid Ross' program. He was interviewing me because he heard this story and he asked me to share. And when I said this, he stopped the program and canceled it and kicked me off. He says, "You're encouraging people to stay in abusive relationships." And I said, "No, I'm not. The scripture says if your mate is pleased to dwell with you, then don't depart." This guy wasn't pleased to dwell with her. And so she was free to depart, but it didn't say you have to depart. So if you feel like your life is threatened, your children's lives are threatened or something, and if you feel like that's what God called you to do, I think that if the person has poured hot grease over you or broken your neck, I think you're free to go. And I told her that. But I said, you can stand and believe if you want to. And anyway, she came to work for me, and I just spent about 6 months teaching her what the Word says. And I was teaching her some of these same things. And I guarantee you, this guy was a problem. It's not like she was all of the problem, but she did respond negatively to him. She had hatred for this guy. And some people probably right here say, well, she's justified. Well, justified by man's standards, but God told you if they offend against you 70 times in one day, then you turn around and forgive them. 70 times 7, 490 times in one day, and you forgive them. And I told her, I said, it's only what's on the inside of you that makes you so hurt and angry, but only because you have to have His approval. And I said, He could come and say to me the exact same words He says to you, and it wouldn't affect me the way it affects you. And she says, well, of course not. He's not your husband. I said, that's the deal. You're the one that placed the value on this. You're the one that can't live without His approval. And I said, I don't have that value on him. And I said, His words wouldn't affect me. And so anyway, I began to teach her, and it's a long, long story, but she just began to start believing God, and he was persecuting her. He was a Baptist deacon. He could quote all of the New Testament, but he was demon-possessed, and he was doing it. It was bad. He would leave his body at night and howl at the moon and stuff, and it was demonic, the stuff he was doing. And so anyway, this lady decided that she finally talked to him enough that they decided that they'd go to a counselor. So they went to a counselor who was a friend of mine up in Evergreen, Colorado. And they drove up there, and so the counselor asked the man first, what's your side of the story? And he lied and said everything about her that he had done to her. And said, she's broken my neck. She's poured hot grease over me. She came with a butcher knife. She does all, and he just lied about her. Let me ask you, how many of you, if you were in a marriage session, counseling session, and your mate lied about you, how many would just sit there and let them lie? I doubt seriously that there's many people that would let them lie about you that way, because, man, you have to be shown right. It's important. This woman didn't say a word. And the counselor, this friend of mine, got so mad that he stood up and he says, you divorce that woman. You don't have to put up with this kind of stuff. And the wife of the counselor settled him down and said, look, there's always two sides to every story. So let's hear her side of the story. So they asked her what had gone on. And instead of her defending herself, instead of her saying one critical word about him, she said that I used to think he was the problem and that it was him that caused everything, but I've realized now that it's only my pride that has made this contention. Proverbs 13:10. And God is dealing with me, and God is helping me to humble myself, and God's working on me, and I'm changing as quickly as I can. And she didn't criticize him. She just said, I've been wrong too. And so the counselor said, leave her, divorce her. And they left. And when they got out to the car, the man was shaking. And he says, why didn't you defend yourself? Why didn't you say something? And she said, Jesus has already healed me. And Jesus is taking care of me. And if you running me down helps you, then she says, that's fine. She says, I don't have to have your approval. That's awesome. And did you know he got so scared, he lost his ability to do any of these demonic things. And he says, your God's bigger than my God. And he actually moved out of the house for 6 months. And she got the kids out of the basement, got them up and started trying to minister to them and get them healed. And anyway, the guy got born again and wanted to become a minister. And then I had to deal with him because they were having marital strife over he wanted to go to Rhema and become a preacher, and she didn't want to be a preacher's wife. But now that's an attitude, see, of a person who she admitted that she was wrong. And she actually got to praying, God, why is he doing what he's doing? She not only looked at what he did, but why is he doing it? And she went back, and the Lord reminded her that her husband was Puerto Rican, and he was dedicated to the devil at birth. They killed a chicken and poured blood all over him. And he was raised in the occult. And this is the way he was raised to be. And she actually got to feeling mercy for this guy who was doing such bad things when she saw why he was doing what he was doing. And she actually fell in love with this guy and got to loving him. It was awesome. Now, I know that may not work out that way for everybody, but the principles are there. The principles are there. That you know what? You can get so healed that you don't have to be proven right.